Hello guys, and today what we're going to do is uh, nitpick and create one of a provider. In the last section, what we have done was we created a user controller that handles the request and response from a client. The client can be a postman or any front end application. Then we have registered it as an endpoint of users. So on top of the class called users, so it will be slash users. And then next, what we have done is we have created a file before prior. So we have created a file called users module, and this module registers the users controller that has all the endpoints for our functionality of the users. In the next, for the system to run with the module itself, which is the user module, what we have done is instead of putting it in the main.ts, we did it in a better way, in a more beautiful way, whereby we are putting it in the app.module, where the app.module handles all the modules itself, be it from the users module or any other modules. We don't have any other modules, but yeah, in the future we'll be adding other additional modules. So we have added it in the import section where it has the users module. Now, what we will do today would be to showcase the functionality of providers. What we'll do is we will decouple the logic in the users controller, the logic from how to manage the users, and we will decouple it and put it in a different class called user service. So the user service will have all the functionality that we have here in all the methods, and the controller will just call the methods from the user service. So let's create under the users folder. So make sure that you are on the users folder. Create a file, so new file called users.service.ts. And in the users.service, we'll be having as class users service. So it will have the same logic. So we could say, go to the users controller, copy and paste the whole thing without the endpoint, of course, without the get method and those kind of stuff. So let's just copy and paste, and let's remove the get method. Let's remove this method, this post method, this put method, this delete decorator as well. And we don't need the parameters as well. The parameters only for request and response, and for this service it doesn't call any request and response. So let's remove that here. Let's remove this. Let's remove that. Let's remove this and this. All right. So we have done that. Now what we have to do is import the users. So the list of users, what we'll do is import and open curly braces, and we'll call it coming from the entity and the entity user.entity, and then we'll import the user and users. Now we have done that. So again, to format it, you say Alt Shift F, or you could say like format in here. All right. Now next would be we have to export the user service in order for the controller to recognize this user service. So let's just say export user service. Now go to the users controller. Now what we'll do is we will import the user service. We'll say user service coming from the .users.service. I don't have too much intelligence. It does everything for me most of the times. So you might remember it will be in the current directory, which is .users, and then it will become .users.service. Now what's next is in order for the user controller to use the user service, what we have to do is create the constructor. So we create the constructor, and in the constructor we'll be having private users service, and then users service, close the parentheses, and then open and close curly braces, and clean that. So that's how it should look like. And then what we will do is we will change here, refactor everything. So we will do here this dot user service dot get users, and then curly braces, and here we'll use user service and call it get user ID. All right, let me remove this, and let's just call return this dot user service dot create user. All right, let me remove this one as well. All like anything that is within the method. So let's remove this. Return this dot user service dot update user, and then it will be ID and data. Let me remove this. Oh, I made a mistake somewhere. All right. Oh yeah, I didn't change it. I didn't finish it. ID data. All right, and here let me delete this, and instead it will be dot this return this dot user service dot delete user, which will be an ID, and that's it. Now we have completed the user service, but now if you try to run it, it won't work because the user service wasn't registered as a provider. So now let's try to run it. So npm runs.dev, and if you notice, it is giving an error which says here potential solutions or error Nest cannot resolve dependency of users controller. So the dependency will be the user service. User controller is not able to initialize this user service class. So what we have to do is register this user service. So what do we do is first things first, we will register the user service as a provider. How do we do that? We get a decorator from the Nestjs common module. So let's say from, and then Nestjs, and then common, and here inside the curly braces we'll call something called injectable. And then on top of the user class, we'll add our decorator, so injectable, and that will be it for user service. Next would be, as always, we will register on the root module, which is called users module. And in here, in the add module, so let's give some spacing. We'll have, okay, let me add a comma. We are able, so if you say control space, you will notice that there's exports, imports, and providers. So import the provider, write it up, and then it will be a type of array. Like if you notice the name itself, it gives us an array of providers if you want to. So now what we'll do is we will import our service from here and call it current directory. The current directory will be just users.service, and we'll put that users.service. Now inside the providers, we'll call this users service. Now we have registered our provider. So Control Shift F to make it much more beautiful and clean. Now we have registered our service. Now let's try to run it again. So npm run start and dev. Yeah, lo and behold, it is running fine. So to test it out, let's go to our URL. So let's say localhost 3000 users, and yes, it is working fine. Everything is working fine. Now, what we could do with the provider is not only we decoupled it, we refactored it, we could do as well, we use this provider. That's what we call it, providers, right? So we will use it in, I have created a file, if you have noticed, users.admin controller. So this controller, what it does is it has what it does is it approves the user, which in this case is approved before it is false, so it becomes true. So in the user's admin controller, we'll have an endpoint. So let's just say approve user, and it requires the ID of the user, and it is coming from it should come from the basically, so we'll call it ID. So let's put that, and then let's use our constructor here, and let's just use private user service, and let's call it users service. And then my IntelliSense auto imported it, so again, okay, let me remove it and do it manually. So I'll say import and users service, and then you close it from coming from current directory users.service. Now what we could do here is we'll say this dot users service, and we'll use the function which should, let me close that. So it will be update user, we'll use the ID of itself, and then we'll call that inside it. So add the curly braces for the second, instead of the data itself, we'll add our data manually. So inside it, what we will call is approved. Sorry for that. So is approved equals to true. So it is approving the okay. Now this function, what it does is gets the ID and it approves, so it will change the status to true for this type of user. Now let's add our params here, so don't forget, because we want to have the parameters here. So let's say param, and inside it we'll call ID. Let me say Ctrl+Shift+F. I think no, that will look ugly, so just do that. Now let's run our command. So let's say npm-1 oh yeah, before that I forgot, you always have to register the controller, which is quite annoying at first, but then you will get used to it. So let's go to the users module, and then we will add it in under the controllers. So let me copy paste this, and let's call user admin controller, and it is coming from in the current directory, and we will call users.admin.controller. And let's copy paste this, so users.admin.controller. Now we have registered our endpoint, which only has one for the admin, so it will be ID application. Now let's run it again. Now to notify that we have added a new endpoint, as mentioned, router explorer, and then you've noticed users ID application. So now we go to the endpoint. So what we'll do is users, and then we'll add our ID. So it will be 1, and then we'll call it as approve. Was it users ID? Oh, application. I should name it much more better, right? So let me use application, and yeah, I should have updated. So let me check again. Is approved. Oh, yeah. My mistake. So there should be, it changes everything, and we don't want to change everything, right? So what we will do is we will go towards our user service. So what did we do here? Oh, okay. We manually updated everything. So let's change it a bit. So what we'll do is we'll call it as, so let's make a method, and let's just say update user, and what it does is, so there is a function called edit user, which is for editing the whole thing, and update user only partly, so we will change only a part of it. So we use ID number, and then here we'll say data, and we'll change it towards, so how do we do it? We'll use users, so users, and let's use the ID itself, and then what we will do is user, and then basically user will be everything. So we will use everything coming from the user, like coming from the user itself, plus the data that we want to change, right? So let's use that user because it is a constant cannot assign to user. Let me update it user. So let's create a const updated user, and let's say updated user. And then what it does is it takes all the data from the previous user and we are adding with the changed data. And then what we'll do is we'll return up, I think, yeah, we'll say user similar to what we have done. So copy and paste line 29 and say updated user. Let's use that. All right. So now user's ID will be similar to the update user, which has the change data. Let's call user updated user. All right. Now let's do it again. So let's go to the endpoint, and the endpoint will be this. So let's use that. And now go to the users. Let's to verify. It shows that it is showing, right? But let's go to the users itself, and you have noticed like number 1 has been changed. Now let's change our other endpoint. So let's call it 0. So that will be this first array. So application. And now we have updated that one. So let's verify it here a bit quick. And you notice is approved is true and is approved is true. So now what we have done here is we decoupled the functionalities, the user managing the user functionality logic from the user controller, and created a provider that is called user service. And then in the user service, it has all the functionality that we need. So for example, be it from getting the user, get user, create user, update user, so updating one to many attributes from the user, or edit user, which changes the whole user function, user attributes, delete user, which deletes one user specifically. And then after that, what we have done is we have gone to the user module and registered as the provider. In addition, to showcase the usability or the usefulness of a provider, we have created the admin controller, which has a functionality, for example, approve user. And in the approve user, we have used the user service, and we use that method, which is update user, to approve the status from false to true. So that would be it. And in the next section, I think, I don't remember what. Yeah, okay. And this next section, I think more about. Yes, I think, yeah, I remember. I recall. So now, if you have noticed, we have done most of the times data.any, like it would be an any type, and in TypeScript usually we don't do that, right? So so we will do it much more more statically typed in this case, and verify whatever we have from the post. And how do we do that? We'll check that in the next section.